There was a time when you couldn't turn on daytime television without seeing her. A woman with a raspy voice, a chopping knife in one hand, and a habit of talking a mile a minute while somehow still explaining exactly how to get dinner on the table in half an hour. Rachael Ray wasn't a classically trained chef. She never claimed to be one. And yet she became one of the most recognizable faces in American food television, built an empire out of quick, unpretentious cooking, and along the way lived through moments that never made it into her cheerful, on-camera persona. So what actually happened to her? And what does her life look like today? Let's get into it. Rachael Ray's story doesn't start in a television studio. It starts behind the counter of a gourmet market in upstate New York, where she worked in the food business long before anyone in Hollywood knew her name. Customers would come in tired after work, unsure what to make for dinner, and she'd walk them through fast, simple ideas using whatever they already had at home. There was nothing polished about it. It was just practical advice from someone who understood that most people don't have an hour to spend on a weeknight meal. Out of those everyday conversations came the concept that would eventually define her career: cooking a full meal in 30 minutes. It wasn't dreamed up as a brand. It was simply the answer she kept giving to the same question over and over until the idea had a life of its own. By 1999, that idea had turned into a local cooking class, and not long after, into her first cookbook. The book sold the promise of a stress-free dinner, and it caught on fast with exactly the audience it was written for: working parents, students, and anyone who didn't want to spend their evening scrubbing pots. That early success is what put her on the radar of Food Network executives, and in 2001, she was offered her own show. 30-minute Meals premiered in 2002 and ran, in various forms, for close to 2 decades. It became the foundation for a media career that eventually included travel and lifestyle shows, a magazine launched in 2005, and a syndicated daytime talk show that debuted in 2006 and stayed on the air until 2023. Somewhere along the way, she also published more than 24 cookbooks and built out product lines under her own name. From the outside, it looked like an uninterrupted winning streak. It wasn't. Long before Rachael Ray was famous, her voice already stood out. That rough, husky sound became one of the most recognizable things about her, so distinct that people could identify her without even looking at the screen. For a long time, viewers assumed it was either a stylistic choice or the result of years of shouting over kitchen noise. Neither guess was correct. Ray has said publicly that the root of her voice goes back to childhood, when she dealt with repeated bouts of croup, a common respiratory illness in kids that can leave the airway inflamed. In most children, the effects fade with time. In her case, the damage to her vocal cords stuck around, giving her a naturally rougher voice than most people have to begin with. As her career grew, so did the strain on her throat. By 2008, rumors began circulating that she had throat cancer, serious enough that her representatives had to step in and shut the story down directly. The truth was less frightening, but still significant. Doctors had found a benign cyst on one of her vocal cords. She initially tried to avoid surgery altogether, working with a voice therapist for months in hopes the cyst would shrink on its own. When that didn't fully work, she went through with a short outpatient procedure in the summer of 2009 to have it removed, followed by a period of enforced silence to let her voice heal. For someone whose entire job depends on talking, being ordered not to speak for even a short stretch is no small sacrifice. She's talked openly about the daily maintenance her voice requires since then, from vocal exercises to cutting back on caffeine, which could dry out and irritate the vocal cords. It's a strange thing to think about. One of her most charming, most her qualities was actually something she had to actively manage just to keep doing her job. Before any of the fame, Rachael Ray's life in New York took a genuinely dangerous turn. She moved to the city in the mid-1990s to build a career, landing in Queens like countless other young people chasing an opportunity. It was a period when crime rates in the city were beginning to trend downward compared to the decade before, but improving didn't mean the danger had disappeared. According to accounts she's given over the years, she was the target of a violent street mugging near her apartment, and the experience was frightening enough that it changed how she thought about living in the city. A 2005 profile in the New York Times drawing on her own recollections of that period, described a mugging outside her Queens building as one of several rough experiences, alongside a difficult breakup and a broken ankle, that eventually pushed her to leave the city and move back upstate. It wasn't a decision she made lightly, but it also wasn't one she agonized publicly over. She's described her reasoning in blunt, matter-of-fact terms. After being through something like that, of course you'd want to leave. That move upstate ended up maturing more than she probably realized at the time. It's where she rebuilt her footing, and it's where the low-key, practical cooking style that eventually made her famous kept taking shape, far away from the pressure of the city. She would return to New York later for her television career, and by 2005, she'd married attorney and musician John Cusimano. But that early stretch, young, unknown, and genuinely shaken by what she'd experienced, is a part of her story that rarely comes up next to the cheerful, high-energy persona most people know her for. By 2009, Rachael Ray was firmly a household name, and a partnership with Dunkin' Donuts seemed, on paper, like an obvious fit. Her whole brand was built around food that didn't require money or fuss. Quick, affordable, no pretension. Coffee and donuts fit right into that world. Then came the backlash, and it came from an unexpected place: fellow television chef Anthony Bourdain. Bourdain was one of the most respected and outspoken figures in food media, and he didn't hold back, publicly blasting Ray over the deal and accusing her of pushing unhealthy food on children. Because his opinion carried real weight in the culinary world, the criticism spread fast and far beyond the usual entertainment gossip cycle. Then a second controversy piled on top of the first. In one of the Dunkin' ads, Ray wore a black and white patterned scarf, and some online commentators claimed the pattern resembled a keffiyeh, a traditional Middle Eastern garment that carries political associations in certain contexts. What started as an argument about fast food and children's health suddenly became a strange, unrelated argument about symbolism and politics. The scarf was pulled from future promotional material, and the story kept generating headlines for weeks. Ray didn't disappear or go quiet. She addressed the criticism directly in interviews, explaining that Dunkin' had approached her while working to expand healthier options on their menu, and that she'd grown up drinking their coffee, so the partnership felt personal rather than purely transactional. She also pointed out that Dunkin' had supported Yumo, the nonprofit she founded to help families build healthier relationships with food. When asked directly whether she regretted the deal, her answer was simple: she didn't. Not every controversy attached to Rachael Ray's name actually involved her. One of the strangest examples had nothing to do with cooking at all. It started with rumors swirling around Jay-Z and Beyoncé, and an Instagram caption posted by fashion designer Rachael Ray that fans connected to lyrics from Beyoncé's 2016 album Lemonade. The internet, moving at its usual speed and with its usual disregard for spelling accuracy, quickly confused Rachael Ray, the fashion designer, with Rachael Ray, the television cook. The two women have nothing to do with each other professionally. One designs clothing, the other hosts cooking shows. But once the mix-up took hold online, Ray reportedly found herself on the receiving end of angry messages from people convinced she was somehow involved in a celebrity relationship she had zero connection to. It's a strange but telling example of how quickly public anger can misfire, especially when two names sound almost identical and a large, passionate fan base is already primed to react. Rachael Ray married John Cusimano in 2005, and for years the two presented a relaxed, playful partnership on camera, with Cusimano occasionally joining her for segments on her talk show. That didn't stop the tabloids from going after their marriage more than once. In 2007, gossip outlets ran stories claiming Cusimano had been unfaithful, citing unnamed sources with little in the way of actual evidence. Ray responded publicly and directly, standing by her husband and dismissing the claims. The story faded, only to resurface in a different form years later, in 2013, when tabloids alleged Cusimano had ties to a nightclub associated with the swinging lifestyle. Their representatives denied the story outright, calling it another example of tabloid journalism running with unverified claims. What's notable is Ray's consistent response to both rounds of rumors. She never publicly wavered, never turned the story into a bigger spectacle than it already was, and never let it change how she talked about her marriage in public. Whether or not that made the gossip die down any faster is another question. Tabloid stories about celebrity couples tend to have a long shelf life regardless of how firmly they're denied. In late 2013, Ray's family experienced a genuine tragedy. Her aunt died in an accident in upstate New York after reportedly being locked outside during freezing weather. It was the kind of sudden, senseless loss that's difficult for any family to process, and it became harder still once it became public. Reports at the time indicated that Ray and her husband were unable to attend the funeral due to work obligations, and a family member spoke to the press criticizing that decision. What began as a private grief quickly turned into public commentary about whether Ray had prioritized her career over her family, with outside observers weighing in on a situation they had no real insight into. It's a reminder that fame doesn't just amplify the good moments. It can pull painful, complicated family situations into a spotlight they were never meant to be under. In August 2020, in the middle of an already difficult year for most of the world, Ray and Cusimano's home in Lake Luzerne, New York, caught fire. The blaze started in the chimney of a wood-burning fireplace and spread quickly through the house. A neighbor spotted the flames and alerted the couple, who were home at the time and got out safely along with their dog. The house itself did not survive. The fire caused extensive damage before crews could get it under control. It wasn't just a house. Ray had lived there for roughly 2 decades and had filmed portions of her show from the property during the pandemic. In interviews afterward, she spoke about the loss in personal terms, describing it as losing physical proof of a shared life: letters, photographs, gifts, and keepsakes that couldn't be replaced. Rather than dwell on the loss, she and her husband began rebuilding, eventually moving back into the reconstructed home years later. The experience also led her to launch a series focused on helping other families rebuild after losing their homes to disasters, using her own experience as a way to connect with people going through something similar. Despite decades of success, Rachael Ray has never fully escaped a certain strain of criticism. The idea that she isn't a real chef because she never attended culinary school. She's never hidden that fact or pretended otherwise. Her entire identity was built around being a confident home cook, not a classically trained one, and that distinction has always been part of the appeal for the millions of viewers who related to her more than they related to fine dining television chefs. Alongside that, she's weathered years of unverified rumors, claims that she's difficult behind the scenes, that she's a poor tipper, that she's had extensive cosmetic work done, even a persistent but baseless rumor about a feud with Oprah Winfrey, despite the fact that Ray's talk show was actually produced by Oprah's own company. Most of these stories share a common thread: anonymous sourcing, little verifiable evidence, and just enough repetition across